Good morning, all. Thank you very much for taking your time out today and coming together as we share the experience with Arnaud and Damian today regarding a very exciting topic on wearable technology in the workplace. Last week, we saw Arnaud doing some really good, talk about some really good stuff when it comes to robotics, and today's a bit more focused on the actual wearables within the workspace. So I'm really interested to see how that unfolds. Just before we kick off, guys, from formality point of view, all microphones are muted. So if you want to have a chat, please use the chat function. If you have any questions for myself, Arnaud, or Damian, please use the chat and answer function. At the end, if there are any time left over, please, I'll open up the lines if you've got any more questions that you want to ask any of us. There will be a few poll questions throughout the webinar, 2 in the start and a couple at the end. So please, we really appreciate your feedback on these, your participation in these, as well as all the answers are anonymous. So please feel free to answer honestly. Then, just from a shop care perspective, guys, I know majority of you are well known to shop care, or you know about shop care, but we are a non-for-profit organization, and we really strive to create safer workplaces sooner within the industry. So here's a bit of other webinars that's coming up. On Thursday, you can catch myself. I'll be talking about an overview of critical risk exposure within our industry and what are some of the other opportunities out there. So join me on Thursday. And share this as well if you think there's others that can find a value out of that. If you haven't downloaded a copy of the critical risk report just yet, it's pretty comprehensive. You can find that on our website. Next, we've got a very experienced individual called Brent Sutton, and he has offered up his time to do a 8-part machine safety series. These series are only 30 minutes long per session, and they'll start on the 8th of November, going right through to the 21st of March. I think it's about every 2 to 3 weeks, there's one 30-minute session. After that, we've got Darren Cottingham, and he's been working with and collaborating with a number of organizations, not just in New Zealand, but also internationally. And he'll be sharing his experiences and knowledge on falling asleep at the wheel and how fatigue is killing our workers and what we can do to prevent that. And then lastly, for 2023, sorry, not 2023, for 2022, my apologies, I'm really jumping the gun there. We've got 2 experienced individuals from the logistics sector, and they will help us understand from a New Zealand market point of view, what is chain of responsibility for supply chains and how we can move the dial. So please make sure that you catch one of those or all of them. They are pretty good. They're going to be brilliant. Lastly, from a shop care perspective, guys, just a couple of things that we are working on and we have done already. On our website, you can find as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, the critical risk exposure report. Download your own copy. You'll find a couple of hierarchies of controls that we've got on there that will help you, guide you in developing your own site-specific ones. We've got a really comprehensive driver safety guide that we've developed with AA Motoring. And lastly, we are working on a couple of bow ties that will be available very soon on our website. On violent and aggressive behavior, we're currently working with Skills VR and see how we can do immersive training and de-escalation processes when it comes to workers who are public facing. Then we've got another project also going on in the VAB space that's working with one of our government parties, but unfortunately I can't say too much about that just yet. We are just working through the final details. We've got a site markings project. I don't know if some of you know, but you know, there's no real standardization when it comes to site markings at any of our sites. Everybody's just doing their own little thing. And we are working with WorkSafe and creating some guidelines on what does a safe site look like from a marking perspective. And then lastly, we are currently working on a participative ergonomics piece. And participative ergonomics is very pertinent to what we'll be talking today, is basically that musculoskeletal piece and how we can do early intervention, injury management. We've got a first move that you can, that's also available on our website that you can take part in, and how to prevent injuries and how to mitigate current discomfort before they become actual musculoskeletal injuries. So that's a piece of work that we're also been doing, and also collaborating with ACC on that one. But that's basically enough from my end. Before I hand over to Damian and Arnaud, I quickly want to launch 2 poll questions. I would really appreciate your participation. So I'll be launching the first poll question. Give me 2 seconds. And guys, just remember, most of the poll questions are multi-answer, so you can choose all the ones that are relevant to you. So poll question 1, thinking about the application of wearable technology in your workplace, identify the statements that are most relevant. My organization believes in wearable technology. Let me just open up my screen a bit here. Is important in improving business outcomes, or believes wearable technology are important in improving employee safety, believes wearable technologies are important in improving employee productivity and efficiency, believes wearable technologies are important in improving employee health and well-being, has purchased wearable technologies to assist employee in performing their task safely, has purchased wearable technology to assist employees in performing their tasks productively, and I'll just try and open up, I can't see that last piece, guys, I do apologize. And is actively scanning the market and supply for wearable technologies, is looking to trial new wearable technologies to access performance and return on investment, has failed new wearable technologies to access performance, and has not yet applied wearable technologies. Alrighty. I'll give you a couple of seconds to complete that. Okay, and I'll end the poll, and the results are pretty damning. We haven't tested or applied wearable technology. That's pretty 100% from everybody that's here today. Stop sharing. Okay, guys, just one more poll question, and then we'll start off today. I'm launching it as we speak. Okay, thinking about the barriers to applying wearable technology in your organization, identify the statements that are most applicable to you, and they are cost of technology, staffing, administration of the wearable technologies, analyzing and developing insights and improving programs for the data collected from the wearable technology, enrolling stakeholders and influencers in the decision to implement wearables, employee acceptance and agreement to participate in the use of wearables as a tool for their tasks, risk assessments, and integrating wearable technology across the overall workplace safety systems. I'll give you a couple of seconds for that and choose all the ones that are relevant. I'll give you about 5 more seconds, guys, and okay, in poll, it seems like we've got cost of technology, analyzing and developing insights and proven programs for data collected, enrolling stakeholders, influencers, and employee acceptance and agreement to participate is the overall 4 ones that are relevant. The others have none of them has selected those. Okay, so before I go on, guys, thank you very much yet again for coming to Run today. I would like to introduce Arnaud as well as Damian. Damian is the CEO for Exxovantage in Australia. Arnaud is the global CEO for Exxovantage. They both have vast experience when it comes to this type of technology within the industry. And without further ado, I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to hand over to Arnaud and Damian. Thank you, guys. I'll be in the background. I'll be monitoring all chats and comments.
Thank you, Wes, for having us again this week. Hopefully that was valuable last week, and we'll talk about a bit more about technologies that are very important in the workplace in modern times. So Exxovantage, right? So just a quick note on the company and what we are about. So you can slide down if you want, Wes. I think you have the control. So Exxovantage is basically a workplace solution provider. So that means that we are not a distributor. We are driven by people, and we are driven by data, and we are driven by solutions, which means that the technology is a tool. We're not driven by recommending a specific type of product. We have a lot of technology under our umbrella, but for us, it's really about making the right decision in terms of wearables or exoskeletons as a technology. So we have a few core sort of products or categories that we do have, which are workplace wearables, which we talked about last week in details. Which we're going to talk about this week. Exoskeletons and exosuits, we talked about that a bit more last week, and then somehow the result from those technologies are the big data that we get from that, which is very important to make better decisions, categorize, and predict what is happening in your workplace. Next, Wes. As a company, especially as a growing company globally, we are driven by our core value, which is basically empathy and compassion. So for us, it's really important that we value people being at the top, which means that all decisions are made, whether they are human decisions, whether they are business decisions, people, staff, workplaces are at the core of how we think and how we make decisions. So for us, this is leading to empowering and protecting the workforce that we do have with our integrated solutions and technologies. It really matters because as we keep growing globally, we need to ensure that the vision is translated across every team, whether it is in New Zealand, Australia, the US, and so forth. So it's important that everyone is aligned on this vision. And then how we implement this vision is through our mission, which is basically increasing productivity, safety, longevity, and well-being for the benefit of all. Thank you, Wes. So who is behind Exxovantage? As I mentioned, so I run the company from here in New Zealand, in Auckland. The board is based here in Auckland as well. We have business development manager based in Auckland, based in New Zealand, Damian and his team based in Australia, and Matt, our ergonomist, is based in the US. And with technology now, we can manage it all wherever we are, which is fantastic. And that also allows us to have because we address different verticals, whether they are logistics, manufacturing, retail. We have cross insights. We see what is coming, the challenges that some companies that might have in Australia, and we can predict better what is going to happen, whether it is sustainability, whether it is ergonomic challenges. We can predict better what is going to happen, looking at what is happening in the US or here or in Australia. Next, please. Yes, so Damian will, who is leading the team in Australia, will talk more about wearable technology in the workplace here in New Zealand and in Australia, but it will give you it will dive into this technology and how we transform organizations using different wearables and the KPIs that we exceed using the technology.
Thanks, Arnaud. And thank you to Wes for organising this session this morning. And good morning to everyone on the call. Look, guys, I mean, the first thing is probably just some, what we probably all know and all identify as being, largely the top 10 issues that are rolling across our industries and everything that's specific to people and work health, place and safety. And I'm not going to roll through these because I know that you'll probably look some of these and you go, yes, these are things that I understand and things that I'm experiencing, possibly in my own business. So Wes, if you could roll to the next page, please, mate. As Arnaud sort of said at the beginning, we really kind of like have two vertical solutions. One is workplace wearables, which are largely about sensor-based technologies, whether that's watches, whether that's sensors placed on the back of workers, and these are all about basically tracking movements and biometrics, and then off the back of that, real-time attributed data that can be applied both to our businesses and to our workers and tasks and across the system as a whole. Exoskeletons, you saw a lot about last week with Arnaud, so I won't go back through that. Next slide, please, Wes. But what we are going to talk about today is kind of workplace wearables. And on the screen there, you'll see basically one of the wearables that we partner with. And this is a haptic-based device that's worn on the waist. And a key partner of ours out of the United States is a bleeding edge company called Module. And those guys we're working with very closely to kind of develop solutions in this space. And interestingly, and why we say they're bleeding edge is because they're, one of their major client is, without having to say the name, is probably the largest e-commerce fulfillment house and warehouse in the world. So next page, please, Wes. So firstly, probably if we take a little bit of an overview of wearables in total, we've got two considerations: what's happening in our businesses, and then basically what's happening for the workers. And as a kind of like a top view, there's really very overwhelming evidence here that businesses are certainly adopting wearables across the globe. Although, as we saw in our poll, probably, and I think it's true, probably traditionally New Zealand and Australia probably tend to follow rather than necessarily lead in these spaces. But I think it's true that we are working with a number of clients in New Zealand and in Australia who are really looking to bring these things into their businesses and apply them. So many of the companies are dipping their toes in the water with these wearable technologies, but kind of niche applications first. So really kind of looking at safety. And 70%, but importantly, 79% of the businesses really see that wearables are going to be a key strategic platform and will agree that wearables are important to their future business success. For those that have actually implemented wearables, they're seeing a very kind of immediate improvement and in their business performance. And, again, you've got kind of, 76% of those acknowledging that. And off the back of that, then, there's a very, very high commitment to increasing investment in wearables over the next 12 months. And interesting, this information comes out of Salesforce, who did a special report on putting wearables to work across the world. Next page, please, Wes. Now, when it comes to the workers, they're positive with, they are kind of positive to the application of wearables and then wearing them in the business environment. And I note that it was kind of one of the questions in the poll about kind of enrolling stakeholders, and workers are one of those. And but what's interesting about this, and again, this is an applied ergonomics survey that was done a little while back then, and mostly US based, I will admit. And what they're saying is pretty much, you know, you've got sort of very high levels of positive willingness to use them when it comes to safety, about environmental hazard, safety at work, safety in process instruction, and safety, and basically, and about improving productivity. However, the second question, the second part of this survey was about, well, okay, so that's at work, but what about, you know, basically at home and at work? And I think where people were a little bit reluctant here was about saying, right, well, you know, yeah, I'm happy to work to either use my own device or use an employer device in the work environment, but I'm not going to give them access to that information in my own home. So lesser willingness to do that, and completely understandable as well. And I think, you know, across the board, one of the issues with it is, of course, around data privacy, you know, being an issue. And in fact, in some of the clients that we're working with, certainly here in Australia, where, you know, we in Australia probably, as you know, are in a very heavy unionised environment, the unions are becoming key stakeholders in the application of wearables as well. Basically, from a point of view of data, from a point of view of particularly where a bit of technology is being applied, you know, like a smartwatch, if you like, and it's kind of, what's the word, you know, posing some, you know, potential long-term physical concerns to a user. So, you know, obviously, like you do with a smartwatch or like we do with a mobile phone, we know if we keep that in our pocket, we're probably sucking in a lot of rays that we may not see the impact of to about, you know, 30, 40 years down the track. Next question, please. Sorry, next page, please. So wearable technologies, as I was kind of indicating, is on a bit of an evolution at the moment. So where it's kind of started is really starting at kind of worker safety first. So and really that's about monitoring, you know, the activities that are undertaken, the behaviours, and measuring those with biometrics. So that being sort of like, well, how many steps are we taking around a warehouse environment? What does our bending profiles look like? You know, we're bending more than 60%. And we know that if we're bending greater than 60% on an ongoing basis, then there is a higher risk of particularly a lower back musculoskeletal injury. And there's also torque. So, you know, as we're twisting from side to side, we know again, you know, depending on weight of what we're carrying, on the nature of the task, then there are, you know, potential kind of injuries that will evolve out of a long-term, you know, long-term tasks, if you like, that will continue to stress the body in that way. But what's the big difference here is when we start to pick up and apply the data through the intelligent computing and the data analytics, and that data is then fed just from the worker activity into a total workplace environment, so into processes, into the amount of time it's taking to do a task, and how efficient or productive that task is. What we're getting to, where wearables are heading to, as kind of a very important connected and contextual network solution. So with the wearables, we're being able to see, right, well, this is how people are actually interacting, not just through safety, through processes and tasks across the whole warehouse environment, if you like. So the net result of that is kind of going from safety, and then, but also off the back of that, and as we know, with good safety, productivity and efficiency then becomes a byproduct of that. So I think what's happening with wearable technologies is that people just starting to learn, right, well, if I can plug this into the rest of the system and know how to do this, then and apply the right kind of data and analysis, again, noting that that was another factor that came up in the poll we did earlier, you will begin to see you know, what I would call amplified benefits beyond just the safety benefits into, right, well, we really understand how we can improve our processes and how we can increase our productivity and the efficiency of the tasks that we do. And interestingly enough, of the partner that we work with, who are working with this, the large US fulfillment house, they're very much moving into that kind of direction. And if, you know, as any of you guys may know, if you're operating 3 shifts a day and you've got, you know, basically a 5 to 7 minute window to you know, basically transfer one shift into another, time is the greatest resource that we have, but that's no good if it's not applied safely and or it's not delivering efficient task delivery throughout the warehouse. Next slide, please. So very quickly, so this is kind of what a connected environment can actually look like, and the vision. And this is a simple demonstration to show this, and really what a connected contextual wearable technology solution can actually look like. So as you look across this, you can see a number of things in here. The first thing is about kind of, you know, movement metrics, the things that we talked about before, about environmental conditions. So in the wearables, and a lot of the wearables now, and particularly in the solutions that, you know, that we're starting to work with, they're measuring air quality. They can be measuring external temperature. And in fact, they can be measuring noise and possibly, you know, any number of other things that come in here. And probably no surprise to any of you guys in New Zealand, but I think in Australia, last summer we had about I think in Western Sydney, which is a large distribution hub, you know, for the country, I think there were some days in warehouses there where we had a sort of a 50 degree plus day. So knowing that your operators are kind of working in that environment and being able to basically instruct them to take more water breaks or take appropriate rests is fundamental to their safety and ultimately fundamental to the overall efficiency of the business. Interestingly, when these products came out as well, and a lot of them started to really emerge and take off probably just before COVID started. So there were a number of additions that were put into these, particularly to the partners that we're working with, that were about sort of measuring social distancing for COVID. And then also being able to apply, you know, and with the data that came out of it, being able to apply contact tracing. There are also some other cross benefits from not necessarily the wearables, but applications of RFID tags across the business that can help with things like PPE compliance. So, you know, no surprise to anyone in this conversation, but, you know, often or not, we know that if you're going to, so if we use a large, you know, cold, deep freezer environment, there are basically a number of PPE requirements in order to enter that environment safely and return. And again, it will come as no surprise that not everyone necessarily takes all of those precautions. But there are ways of using these technologies to kind of tag bits of PPE equipment and basically know that through certain reading gates at the entrances to key environments, that unless that PPE is fully applied to a particular worker, well, then they won't be able to enter that environment. Another interesting thing with the wearables at the moment is also around, you know, particularly kind of interaction with moving vehicles like forklifts, for instance, and in some of the haptics, and particularly again in the partner that we're using, there's a vibration center built into the haptic that can detect, you know, basically moving vehicle in a reasonable amount of proximity to you, that will either buzz you to let you know that you kind of need to look and then move yourself out of harm's way. So next slide, please, Wes. So basically, this is kind of like a bit of a sense of, you know, what goes into these wearables and how they kind of connect into the environment. So if we look at, you know, basically in this instance, a belt that sits across the waist, the device is basically a haptic environment that basically reads activity, and then is able to send data out and have data returned back to the user to inform them, to measure and inform them of either unsafe movement or unsafe activity. The data is sent and stored to be reviewed by supervisors and management. And then with that, training and procedures can be implemented to eliminate injuries from the workplace. And in some cases, and in practical application, these haptics can be set right from the very start. So if we know, for instance, that, bends that are greater than 60 degrees will ultimately, as we said earlier, will ultimately, really result in longer, will have high potential to result in longer term injuries, then those bends can be actively measured and either instruction given on the spot via return to a particular employee, or increased training at the ends of shifts or in other places to, again, kind of monitor and revise particular behaviour. And then, the last point is the one that we talked to earlier, is really where it moves beyond safety into a connected environment situation, where those data insights are really then being able to use to understand behaviours to drive process improvement across the particular business. Two other things worth to note in this particular demonstration here, because the obvious question, right, well, how are they actually applied and administered? So in the picture that you can see on the far right, there's a stand with a black box. These are basically where the wearables are actually stored and recharged, and also data is downloaded from. You've got two choices with data. Typically, you can download data in real time, or you could download data at an end of a particular shift. And these stations, if you like, are where you do that. As an employee would start a particular shift, they would go to that particular environment, pick out a wearable device there. The screen beside it is one where they which attributes that particular device to that particular employee, just simply by barcode application, and therefore you're set up. Now, the beauty of this is this means that you can use this across a multiple workforce. So one, and for argument's sake, one device could be applied to pretty much a maximum of 4 workers. So you do get a lot of utility out of it. It's not just one wearable to one employee. Next slide, please. And as I said, this is kind of like how the data then starts to show in a real-time environment. Now, particularly in the US, what I really think is interesting here is there's 2 applications. One of them is the data goes back to or a set of data goes back to the employee that they could either see through an app that's either on their own mobile phone or on a company-supplied mobile phone, that basically can show them things like the amount of steps that they've walked, the number of bends that they particularly made, the number of bends that they've made, and or any other particular data. And can do that historically, so it could show it this day, this week, this month. And what I love about the applications in the US is that the way that they use them is to basically gamify them. And by that I mean that as an employee basically reads their data and through the data is able to improve their performance, they can be rewarded for that activity. And that could be, via any particular means that is appropriate. Secondly, a sort of a larger set of data then would go back to, if you like, to a work health and safety supervisor or a management supervisor that is then looking at not just employee data in a greater detail, but across a particular section, if you like, picking and packing, for example. And on it goes to be able to see sort of like the whole business and data of how they're performing, not only against that, but against any particular KPIs that are set for that particular business. Now, one of the big questions is also asked, right, well, that's great. And I saw this in one of the questions was about analysing the data. Now, of course, as we all know, the first problem is, well, analysing data, well, where do you even start? Well, the first point is to understand, well, what current data do we have? Now, some organisations have more of that than others, but a great application for a particular wearable is to basically just let the employees wear them and monitor their activity for potentially a week to see where, well, what does the current or extant situation actually look like, in order for you to be able to go and then start to set some particular KPIs for that. So for instance, if you know that, let's just say, again, I'll use the example of the number of bends over 60 degrees. If we know just in the pure setup read that we've got 80% of the workers are performing greater than 60% bends at a frequency of 5 over any particular week or any particular day, then we know, well, that's a key KPI that we want to put in place. So then the haptic is set to then measure greater than 60% bends, that then goes into our KPI mix, because we know that that has an outcome. Hopefully that made sense. Next chart, please, Wes. And again, I'm not going to go through these in great details, but this is probably to give you an idea of the kinds of metrics that are put in place. So bending, twisting, walking, how many steps you've taken. And from that, it will start to calculate, if you like, a sitting or a standing lumbar score, a dynamic lumbar score, so lower back lumbar score, a static lumbar score, when you're kind of the cumulative indicator of static lumbar effort. And, basically then from that, what we'll call a kind of a metabolic equivalent task score. And really, that's one that starts to then give you an idea of fatigue. And basically, now, because we are not, this particular device is not actually plugged into heart rate and blood pressure, as some wearables are. Anyone who owns an Apple Watch would know that. These ME or these metabolic equivalent tasks are basically set up off well-regarded and published MET tables and scores for different known activities. So we use that then as a base to take all the information we've collected to say, right, well, this is what this is starting to look like. Next chart, please, Wes. So this is kind of, the net of all this is, what kind of data and features do wearables typically have? So we're getting risk scoring on either on lumbar or hand or wrist or in threshold settings for preventing injuries, communication. So the ability to be able to communicate with the employee or the employee to the company through that particular device. And, in very practical terms, if there is what we would call a high risk activity that's undertaken by an employee, and in a real live data situation, a supervisor that activity will be flagged, and because we've attributed the data, the employee knows that the supervisor knows that particular device is being used by this particular employee. They are able to flick back basically a message to that particular device, and normally that will happen just as a flash or a buzzing on the device that basically indicates they need to turn to see the supervisor, where they can inform of, basically this activity, the risk of that activity, and what some immediate measures could be taken to prevent that from happening again. Activity metrics, being able to then kind of break down even up to the point, and this is how the level of fidelity could break down employees' day in 1 second intervals across 8 particular activity metrics. So we can see at what time of day, across what type of activities. So obviously that then extends to we can see the one shift is possibly more risky than others in particular activity. Oh, by the way, I'll add another thing that I think is really interesting here too. Because of the attribution of data, clearly, if we know that we have in an environment where we have a diverse employee set and we have a mix of both male and female workers, and we have workers in over, let's just say, in the over kind of 30, over the over 35 or the 45 to 55 age brackets, where we know instinctively that potential injuries are likely to be greater, then we can also adjust risk scoring or basically, risk profiles to particular cohorts as well, which I think all of us would understand that actually makes a lot of sense and is a really kind of unique feature. Forklift driving we talked about earlier, operational occasion. So again, once we aggregate all of that data, we can actually, and we understand what's happening on a second by second basis across shifts and cohort types. We can adjust procedures and we can adjust behaviours accordingly to deliver better productivity or efficiency. Environmental warnings we talked about. Another key one is lone worker safety. So if we were in an environment, let's consider an early morning shift, there's not as many workers, we detect a lack of movement or an awkward angle from a particular employee, that can be used as an immediate emergency signal to go check on that worker to make sure that they are fine and that nothing nasty's happened to that particular individual. As I said, in a COVID, high COVID kind of environment, contact tracing and social distancing data is also there and available in that environment as well, which again, in the world we're living in now is obviously a big benefit. Next page, please, Wes. Now, probably impact. It's all fine to talk about how great these things are, but what kind of benefits are they actually delivering? Now, I described a situation to you earlier where this is a large distribution center in the US that's basically taken on these devices. And as you can see, in the first 2 weeks, what they did there was just allow the employees to wear the wearables initially, just to get a read on what current activity actually looked like. And in this case, they were looking, this is just bend rate over the program. So they just took this one key metric. As you can see, in the first 2 weeks, and initially at the start, quite high. And what they did do was, it's kind of like a bit of a placebo effect, did tell them that the wearables would start measuring the amount of their bends. And obviously they have ongoing information telling them that the more that they bend, or the greater degree that they bend with heavier weights over time, will and could result in greater injury. So with that kind of placebo effect, automatically they started wearing the wearables, those bend rates started to decline. When they got to the third week and they kind of knew what the levels will look like, they set the haptic to turn on for bends greater than 60 degrees. Now, the proof's in the pudding there. In the following weeks, then through measuring and then continued interaction and guidance with the workforce on those particular bends, they were able to reduce those quite significantly. And given that the idea was to reduce greater than 60% bends in a particular hour, they had a 34% reduction in the number of bends per hour that were greater than 60, a reduction in the number of bends greater than 60 was 70%, and a reduction in the percentage of the total bends that they were making that were greater than 60% were reduced by 57%. Now, that's not bad after 10 weeks. Next chart, please, Wes. And I think a really kind of interesting sign that I think is probably very familiar to this particular group is that we know that when we've got new employees coming into any particular environment, if you like, they're not industry fit, they're probably not even warehouse or logistics fit, and we've got to spend a fair bit of time just in training to get them up to a level of safety that we feel comfortable putting them into that particular environment. As I said, and similar to the chart before, the beauty of these wearables was to make them an immediate part of the orientation program, have them basically wearing them right from the get-go, and then the device activated after 40 hours to establish a baseline, then daily scorecards with that particular group to show behaviours and areas of improvement, and the system gamified to reward employees on progress, ultimately to where they got to graduation. And the Americans love a graduation, as we all know. So the results then were, if you like, pretty substantial. So 85%. In the first year of implementation, we saw a drop in the numbers of total claims, of injury claims, by 85%. And these are of musculoskeletal claims. 61% reduction in the total injuries over a 10-month period. And probably the big number was a 60% reduction in the workers' injuries compensation. So workers' injuries declined by 40% and the compensation declined by 60%. So these things do give an immediate and visceral return on investment. Next chart, please, Wes. So, you know, I thought at this point, if there's any particular kind of questions that anyone had, we're happy to kind of take those now. Or if not, then feel free to, my contact details are at the end. And if you'd like any kind of more specific kind of information or questions that you had, by all means do. But I will say this before I go. In one of the major customers that we're trialing wearables with at the moment, the three real issues that they have is basically one of specifically with the stakeholders, getting the stakeholders on side, and that includes the unions as being a big one, and having the unions understand, well, what is the benefit of this to the employees, and secondly, what's the benefit going to be to the organisation as a whole. The second big question for them is sort of, rightio, so this is all great, but how are these wearables administered and implemented? So what is that going to mean for our business, and what do we need to do as an organisation, and particularly as a work and health and safety group, in order to be able to implement these things efficiently? And again, I think what the examples that I've given you here, and particularly with the partner that we're working with, they've done a lot of work on this, and particularly with with a significant organisation to meet these challenges and answer these questions. So we're kind of like a long way along the road on those. Of course, what at the end of the day, what does all of that mean? Well, it means that if you're going to put these things into your business, you want to know, are you going to make people safer? But secondly, is the cost of implementation going to be a cost negative, or is it going to be cost neutral or cost positive? And the proof of wearables so far, and particularly in what we've seen with our partners, and the example I've given you, is there has been a positive benefit. So if there's any questions, happy to take those now.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Damian. That was really interesting stuff. Guys, while you're thinking about your questions and popping them through in the Q&A function, we've got a few poll questions just to want your attention on. So I'm going to launch the next poll question, and we'd really like your participation in them. So think about the workplace safety, productivity, and efficiency challenges. Identify the statements that are most relevant and important to your organization. Remember, this is multi-answers. You can choose all of them that are relevant. Reducing musculoskeletal injuries, reducing employee time off due to injury, exposure to claims from employee injuries, improving workplace systems and processes, improving employee task-related performance, employee health and well-being, improving workplace safety culture, stakeholder and industry recognition, and then lastly, community recognition as an employer of choice. We'll give you a couple of more seconds to go. Yeah, I'll give you another few seconds. Okay, good. In poll, and I'll be sharing those results. So a good 67%, of attendees are saying, reducing musculoskeletal injuries. Same for time off. Same for, improving workplace conditions, systems and processes. All of them saying improving employee task-related performance. That was pretty interesting. And guys, second last question coming up to you right now, launching it. Thinking about innovation technology and their applications in the workplace, identify the statements that are most relevant to your organization. My organization embraces innovation as key business driver, believes technology will give it a sustainable competitive edge, invest in developing its own technology, has a dedicated innovation function or innovation leader, actively seeks out new technologies that can enhance our business performance, uses data for technologies to collect, measure, and provide insights to our workplace performance, and lastly, has implemented new technologies within the last 2 years. I'll give you a couple of seconds to go through those. Interesting. Remember 5 more seconds. Alrighty, sharing results. So majority are saying, has implemented technologies within the last 2 years, pretty split up when it comes to actively seeks out technologies, uses data for technology to collect, measure and provide, and invest in developing its own technology. And before we get into the last Q&A session, guys, it's a quick shop care poll. Pretty standard stuff, and it is: has this webinar been of value to you, and will you do things differently? The answers are either yes, I found this of value and will do things differently, yes, great to obtain confirmation of what I've done already, or that's didn't learn anything new today. Give you a few seconds to answer those. Then questions time. So from a New Zealand perspective, Damian, Arnaud, what has been the response from overall workers when it comes to these wearables?
Arnaud, do you want to take that from a New Zealand point of view, or would you like me to talk broadly?
You can talk broadly, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think so far the employee reaction has been good. And I think I think it's proven out in some of the data that you've seen and even in trials, is that I think they see it as they are seeing it as a benefit, and probably what, to a degree, although I've only seen one organisation actually ask this question, whether there was so if you like, a question was there perceived improvement in your tasks because you were wearing this particular, or because you had this technology with you? And it was about probably a sort of a 60 to 70% response that yes, that it did give them a perceived improvement in the ability for them to be able to do their tasks. So if you like, that's probably a little bit of hard data that would support a statement that yes, they view this positively.
All right, thank you for that. What advice do you have for businesses that have remote high turnover workers? So for example, if you think about retail merchandisers, they are all over the country, and you don't tend to see them for weeks on end before you see them for the next time. And it's a pretty high turnover. I'm just thumb sucking here, but I'm pretty sure it's anything from 35 to equally to over 40% turnover. So what recommendation would you give for an employer to administer these wearable technologies in an environment like that?
Well, I mean, probably two things. One of them is the beauty of these devices is, as long as you have a Wi-Fi access, these things can be switched on anywhere. So even if you have a dispersed working group, and they can either use their own or company supplied phone that they can slave Wi-Fi to, and provided that they have that they're responsible enough to kind of put the device on when they're actually working and keep it charged so that data can be returned back to the center, then it's entirely possible for their activities to be measured.
Cool. Cool. Thank you for that. I think we've got time for one more question. Guys, any other questions? Do you have any? Put it in the chat or the Q&A function quickly. Interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff, Damian, Arnaud. You know, especially when that slide that shows you everything on one, the types of things or the metrics that you can measure and improve, you know, over time. And that's pretty interesting stuff. And I can't see why organizations won't, you know, lean in more to that. And is it just maybe today's cost of living that's basically stopping them? The cost of everything is just going up, that they are pulling back a bit more investment, or what do you think is some of the key objections there?
Well, look, I can speak to the Australian situation, definitely, Wes, but I think it's actually not so much about the investment, because I think, you know, in Australia we work on a sort of a June to July, you know, finance year, so that, and capital investment on anything that's going to increase productivity and reduce risk and the mitigation of risk and the costs of risk to employees will be invested in. I think the two big issues, the ones I talked about earlier, is it's really like, well, what's the cost of implementation going to be? Not the cost of the capital equipment, or the cost of you know, the service of the software application, but really what are the administration costs going to be, and how are we going to make sure that this is implemented properly? The second bit then is really onboarding the stakeholders, and particularly for the larger organisations, that involves interactions with the unions to get them on side and getting the workers comfortable with, look, you know, this is what this is, and it's not, you know, and it's not going to be an intrusive one, and your data is not going to be compromised. They're kind of like the big three kind of buckets that are sitting in the background. But again, what we found is there's many who are willing to trial and learn, and then be able to apply.
Cool. And then a last quick question, Damian, is do the wearables track all measurables, or do you need to subscribe to each measurement?
No, they'll give you a bank of, you'll get a bank of 8 measurables that, and it depends on, you know, it depends on what kind of device you're looking at, but typically there's a bank of particular measures that just are available right from the get-go. There are some more specifics that can be added that are relevant to your business, and can be built into the software if it's relevant to your business, and that's something that you desire. Yeah, that's probably the answer to that question.
Awesome. Oh, thank you very much for that. If there's any other questions, guys, please direct them to myself or directly to Arnaud or Damian. Our contact details are on here. And I would just like to take this opportunity again to say thank you very much to both gentlemen for taking the time and sharing the solutions they've got here for us, especially for us from New Zealand. I know it's a bit wider than us, but we definitely need all the type of tools and support and systems that we can to help keep our people safer and try to integrate workers safer workplaces sooner in general. I just want to give one more opportunity to both Arnaud and Damian for any last comments before I close out today's webinar.
Just wanted to say thank you before we go, but yeah, thanks a lot for having us. And yeah, so it might be a bit overwhelming. That's, you know, there's a lot going on maybe. So I think it's always best to understand your, you know, each of you has different challenges, different KPIs that you want to, you know, and there is no one solution for every company. So every company is unique. Even if you look at verticals, whether it is logistics, manufacturing, or retail, we can't just apply the same. It's not a cut and paste sort of solution. So what we gave today was an overview of what we provide, the possibilities, but it is important that it is, you know, the solutions are tailored to your needs, right? So it makes sense, whether it is from a human point of view or from a business point of view. So yeah, so do reach out. Happy to help. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Damian?
Nothing to add, mate. Thank you, guys. Really
brilliant.
appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. We know you've all got busy schedules. I appreciate you attending today, and I hope to see all or some of you on Thursday. All the best for the rest of the week, and so see you again. See ya. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.